Hi everybody, welcome to the Creative Process with Vince Ornato. Today we're going to go over a few things about color, using the color wheel, and specifically warm and cool colors.
The Creative Process with Vince Ornato. Vince is a professional Pittsburgh artist that works in many mediums. And now Vince is going to share his creative process with you.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Creative Process. I'm Vince Ornato, a Pittsburgh artist. Today I want to talk about color, but with using the good old color wheel, which we all learned about in grade school, even if you're not an artist. And I want to show how to use the color wheel. It's something you can always fall back on. And I have one right here. It's just a basic color wheel that you could buy anywhere, frankly, from Kmart to a fancy art store. And I want to show how to utilize that when you're doing a painting. Writers will tell you every great novel is in the dictionary. I saw an interview with Ray Charles and he pointed to the piano and he said every great symphony is in that piano. Every great painting is in the color wheel. The question is which colors to use, how to use them. You can't use all of them. As a matter of fact, if you try to use too much, you can end up with a car wreck. Something to think about. Most folks think when they look at a rainbow there's 7 colors, but there's hundreds of colors. When you look at a rainbow, your eye immediately sees stripes, but keep staring at it and you'll see gradations moving from one color to the next, and that's what the real color wheel is all about. The color is segmented here for reasons. But in reality, colors tend to move and change slowly towards each other. For example, we all know about the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. But what's between blue and yellow, for example, is green, because if you mix blue and yellow, you end up with green. But as you're mixing it on your palette, you will see these gradations. You can lighten with white, you can do different things. So more specifically, today I want to talk about how to utilize warm and cool color in your painting. And what I mean by that is the warms will tend to be, if you think of yellow mixing with red, you have these oranges, okay? Those are warm colors. As you mix red with blue, you have purple, and purple is the only color that can go warm or cool. More blue makes it more cool, more red makes it warmer. So you can warm or cool purple, and it's the only color you can do that. When you mix yellow with blue, you have green. Green is always cool. However, people get confused because there's a yellow green, which is sap green. There's more of an emerald green, which is more blue than yellow. So never is green a warm color, but you may say the yellow green is warmer than the emerald green. I don't want to confuse anybody. It's a lot more simpler than you would ever imagine. So I'm going to show you how that works. If you be patient with me, I'm going to show you how that works in painting. So what I want to do today, I want to show you some famous paintings and how this applies, and my own work and how this applies, and do a demonstration for you to make it all come together. These are some pieces by James McNeill Whistler. The upper left is almost entirely cool, but it has a few warm accents. Look at these paintings and think in terms of what we've been discussing here. This is one of my paintings called Time to Go In, Kid, of the famous Edgar Thompson works. It's extremely cool, but again, we have warm sunlight accents coming through in the sky. This is one of my paintings called A Pittsburgh Pour, and these are very, very, very intense warms. I actually layered a lot of the paint in the huge ladle with a palette knife and really caked it on. In the shadows, there are a lot of warms. Here are a couple of my paintings that are cool cityscapes. The Heinz plant on the left and Pittsburgh at dusk on the right, and it's early November as the sun is going down. This is a group of mill interiors, factory interiors that I did. Just look at them. You can pause this if you'd like. Look at the warm and cool colors throughout these pieces. Think that way. Darks and lights, composition, things we talked about before, warms and cools. This is a large triptych I did called The Beauty of Labor. I wanted to do a piece inspired by the three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. These are some paintings by famous artist Winslow Homer and their seascapes. What I want you to look at and focus on is the warm and cool aspects of these. Think of it coming off the color wheel or applying to the color wheel. These paintings by Winslow Homer are out in the sun. Notice the sunlight, the warm colors in the light areas and the cooler colors in the dark areas, the shadows. However, there can be warm shadows, and there are in these paintings, and there can be cool lights. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's something I want you to think about. These are two paintings by Vincent van Gogh. On the left, you see the wheat field, which is warm with the cool sky in the background. On the right is his famous yellow room. It's an interior with greenish yellow colors throughout, and those are cools, even though the warm light, what's happening is the warm light is heating up the cool room. This is a painting I did titled Glory Days. It's the famous view coming in from the Boulevard of the Allies looking down into Pittsburgh when the Jones and Laughlin steel mill was there. When I conceived it, I wanted to get the power of the mill and the high contrast by the cool dominance of the mill and sky is then accented by the bright yellow bursts that you see throughout the painting, which was my concept to get the power of the mill. Okay, these are the Whistler paintings I had just shown you, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to use these as a guide to touch up and start painting into a reproduction of a sketch I did of the Strip District in Pittsburgh a number of years ago. And I have lithographs of these tinted with watercolor. I reproduced this for this demonstration on inexpensive paper. I'm not going to finish it, but I want to show you how you can pull from other paintings, other ideas. This is to bring all this stuff full circle and show you how this might work in your own work. So you get visual ideas from looking at other work. The paintings that came before us are our teachers. So we have a daytime scene here and a nighttime scene here, and Whistler was famous for these types of situations. So what I'm doing in watercolor, I'm going to first do the daytime painting and pulling from Whistler, or at least the beginning of it. I'm not going to complete it, and then we'll see what we end up with. All right, what I'm doing is I'm looking at Whistler's painting. I'm not copying it. I'm not using I'm in effect being influenced by his colors in this particular painting. He has some bluish purplish stuff up top and some sort of brownish yellow ochre stuff on the bottom, and some very dark browns in here. So I'm starting with the sky, and I'm going to create a purplish mix with Prussian blue and alizarin crimson, And you may not always see this on camera, what I'm pulling from, but if you remember what I showed you, you can the great thing about the internet and so on, you can pause and rewind and all that. So I'm using purple for the sky. That's what Whistler has in his. And I'm going towards blue, believe it or not, for the buildings. Now, this is from a sketchbook. It's a sketch, and notice how aggressive I am. If you remember, we talked about composition. These aren't really buildings. These are lines on a piece of paper. And I'm creating my own world here. And I'm going to make this truck a bit darker than the rest of the blue. Now, watercolor is tricky. I don't work a lot in watercolor, and I would never call myself a watercolor artist. But I understand color at my own level, and I can really paint with anything. That's the beauty of this language. This show is not really a how-to show, a how-to paint pictures. It's a show about the process and the thinking that go, what is a painting? I'm going to get some yellow ochre here and some burnt sienna on the bottom there. I'm pulling again from the Whistler. So this is very simple. Get back to the color wheel. Now this side here, I'm going to make darker, as I see in Whistler's painting. I'm going to let that dry a little bit. This side of the car, this is the inside of the car, so obviously it's not in daylight completely, so it's going to be darker. I'm going to come back to the blue. And what I'm doing here is a daytime scene, remember? I'm going to do a darker blue here where the truck is, a little bit over here. Oh, by the way, in watercolor, you're unlike most mediums where you work from dark to middle tone to light. Watercolor, you want to work from light to dark, and it's very, I have to flip my brain around because I'm so used to working in other mediums. That was purple for the sky. Because it's hard, once you darken watercolor, it's very hard to lighten it, if not impossible. And I don't know a lot of watercolor techniques to do that, but all watercolor artists will discuss that problem. Okay, let me get into, you can see the setup now. A lot of it comes from the Whistler painting, the daytime painting. And what I'm going to do now, just to put some accents in there, I probably spent 5 minutes or so painting. Okay, this is a lively scene, and anybody that's from Pittsburgh has been down the Strip District. It's produce yards with a lot of activity, a lot of fruit, a lot of selling, and so remembering this is daytime, we're going to do a green umbrella. Okay. Well, I see these characters carrying watermelon. Okay. I'm deciding the light is coming from this direction, from my upper left. So I'm going to leave some light areas on our left. Let's do this with the woman too. You see how this is building, okay? The point I'm making today is more about using warm and cool color theory to build a painting. This is cool, which would make the warms look even warmer. Okay, let's make our hair a little more browner. That's all I'm going to do on this piece right now. Again, this is just a demo to show you how this builds. Initially, we had a composition in ink, the Strip District. I went to Winslow Homer's daytime scene by the beach to get a sense of some color scheme. I've painted a lot on location, and my Rolodex in my head is pulling from that. And then I began with Winslow Homer's purplish blue sky. I used blue again for buildings and stuff in the background. I used yellow ochre and burnt sienna to use his brownish color for the cars here on the bottom. Then I had a structure started, and now I went in with a variety of color because I want the eye to see this complication in here. That's what I want the eye to go to. So the other stuff is a little more flat. So that way when you look at this when it would be completed, you would see the activity of the figures in the strip district and so on, guys carrying watermelon, the fruit, and so on and so on. Okay, that was a daytime scene. Now we're going to use the same exact drawing. This is a photocopied, to be honest, on inexpensive paper. And we're going to do a nocturnal scene, a night scene, based on Whistler's painting. Now there's a lot of ways to get to these this grayish green. It's cool dominance to a point of almost 100%. There are a couple yellow lights, tiny yellow lights in the deep background, a drop of yellow, and I bet if I looked at the original I'll see some yellow in this. But there's a couple ways to get there. You can add yellow, maybe Naples yellow to black, and that'll give you this greenish gray color. Or you could do add green to black, or green to gray. So what I'm going to do, I have an ivory black on my watercolor and sap green, and you want to use a yellowish green here, not the bluish, the emerald type green. Think of the color wheel again. Predominantly cool. This is absolutely cool, and there's very mild hint of yellow. So I'm going to mix what I just said. This is the ivory black. Add in some drops of yellow. The sky, the night sky, is lighter than those buildings or the shore or the dock or whatever that is in the deep background. And this gets back to composition. Maybe I'll say a little bit about edges. You could look at entire paintings and there's not a sharp edge in them. I'm doing the sky now. That's a little too green. No, that's okay. Now I'm going to use more black, which is really gray in watercolor. It's not. Black is when you're in outer space, by the way. You put your hand in front of you and you can't see it. There's no light. That's really black. White is when a welder is welding, and if you look at the white area, you can actually burn your eye. That's how bright it is. That's why they wear goggles. It's not just safety from sparks and so on. Okay, there's not much of a difference there. I'm going to darken this to make a point. For this demo, it's a little tricky because watercolor takes time to dry, and there's all other kind of things. But it's a quick way to explain this. Okay, that's darker. As we move down, now the interesting thing about night scenes, and this comes from painting on location and drawing, and just you're sitting in the restaurant, you look out the window at night, you see in a city there are street lights. There's light bouncing around. The sun isn't there. But what you have, there's light coming from places, headlights, cars, so you can cheat. It's like when they say artistic license, you got to know the rules before you can break them. Like I said, Federico Fellini, the famous Italian director, said, "I am a liar, but I'm an honest one." This is not a bunch of cars and people, and I repeat myself for emphasis. It's a bunch of lines on a piece of paper. Actually, not even. It's printed ink. It's not even drawn lines. So what I'm doing here, I'm creating a night scene in the strip district. Let's say it's a late night special day. They did a special sale at night. So I'm pulling from Winslow Homer's, or I'm sorry, James McNeill Whistler's night scene, and using that color scheme to do this. Now, having said that, later when it's dry, if I'm working in watercolor, I can put highlights on the windows. But when I'm done with this little part of the demo, you're going to see the comparison between this and the other painting. Let's go to our watermelons. Remember, they're going to be the same. In reality, they're the same color as the first demonstration, but they have to be darker because it's nighttime. The man's hat, remember, it's nighttime. It's going to be a darker yellow, maybe more like a yellow-green than in the first part of the demonstration. I'm going to stay with the orange shirt on the fella here. It's reddish. And orange, so red and yellow, but that would be too bright. So if you think of the color wheel, red and yellow make orange. Directly across from that would be blue. I'm going to add in a drop of blue, believe it or not, because that'll create a grayish color. Any opposites on the color wheel will create gray. But in this case, it's a gray formed by orange and blue. Now, the reason I did that, I know it's an orange shirt. The most important thing is to think. When you're creating a picture, think it through. And this is the language is dark and light, composition. These things I've talked about in the other show, and other shows, and I'm repeating today. So I'm going to have to go a little further in here because I want to give the illusion of night with this, and leaving these white areas may make it a little trickier. Okay, so if I was doing a night scene of my drawing of the strip district, which I did in my sketchbook on site, on location, and wanted to do a complete painting of it, this might be how I would begin it. Okay, this paper can't take a lot of water. It's not really expensive paper. Okay, that's all I want to show here, and we're going to look at this next to the first one, which was a daytime scene of the same drawing. Okay, the result of this here, you're going to have to use your mind a little bit. This is a foundation for two separate paintings. They're not what I would consider complete. The bottom painting is a nighttime construction of the same drawing, the same scene. The top one is daytime. And to review, in my mind, I'm not necessarily always thinking color wheel, color wheel, color wheel, but I can look towards it to reconfirm what we're doing here. Color wheels didn't come from Mars, they came from nature. The color wheel is a representation of what we see in nature. So at nighttime, this would go darker and darker and darker to really grab the idea of night. This, surprisingly, this car on the bottom could go darker, therefore by consequence that would end up making this top part look lighter, more like daytime. So it's kind of this push-pull thing as you get further into it. But the thing to note is that the color scheme is different for each piece. The one on the bottom I pulled from Whistler's Night Scene. The one on the top I was influenced by his Daytime Scene. What you have to think about is painting and drawing is a language. It's a visual language. Music is an audio language. Writers amaze me, novelists, because with words they form pictures and characters in your mind. At least with music you can hear it. With painting and drawing you can see it. But the theater of the mind is what novelists are working with, and it's incredible to me really with what they do. So think of this as a visual language. You're trying to say something. And what this color, this composition, idea, all these things I've talked about before, they are the tools. They are the words. They are the things you use to express what you're trying to do. So some paintings have a warm dominance, some have a cool dominance. As I said, there is limited color that you can work with, pulling from the color wheel. Some paintings give the illusion of full color, but they're not. It's really limited color. This was from my sketchbook. It's a drawing, obviously. It was Arnold Palmer signed it. I was at a golf event and had him sign this sketch of a green that he hit the ball onto. And what I did here with watercolor, I added color. But if you look at this, for a glance, it looks like color, full color, but it's not. It's very limited. It's only green and some purple in the background for the sky, and there's a note where the flag is. Again, this would be more of a limited color type of painting. One thing about Pittsburgh, by the way, there's a lot of muted scenes with bursts of color, and that's one of the things I like about painting around town, that you have these muted colors but with really cool color accents. Think of the color wheel again. Green is composed of yellow and blue. So there's a yellowish green in here and a bluish green. And then a drop of red to create purple. But for our sake, looking at this, it's green and purple. And I did sort of a burst of reddish orange for the flag. So this is limited color, and I just wanted to use this as an example. Folks, as always, I like to do a book recommendation, and since I worked in watercolor today, this is a fantastic local painter, Frank Webb, who's actually in his 80s now and still going strong teaching and painting. This is Webb on watercolor. He has a prior book, which is also fantastic, called Watercolor Energies. In this book, he goes over a lot of the stuff I was talking about today. And whether you paint in oil, pen and ink, anywhere you're using color, the principles discussed, tint, shade, light, dark, warm, cool colors, will all apply. This is a fantastic book to acquire and learn from. Well, I hope you learned something today about the color wheel and warm and cool colors and how to utilize and study other famous work in order to learn from. And work hard, start, focus, and have a good time with art.